Well, Gillette has taken on toxic masculinity with its latest ad campaign, and it's been met with a very divided response.
Yeah, for 3 decades, the company has used the tagline, "the best a man can get," but it's now pivoting towards the Me Too movement, asking men to consider their behaviour and their response to what they see around them. Have a look at the ad.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says it's
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie. Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool, not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men,
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
A powerful and positive ad, or has Gillette completely missed the mark? One of today's most controversial stories, and tonight's Taking Stock is with Angela Vithulkis, founder of the Small Business Party, and Greg Baxter, partner at Newgate Communications. Greg, first to you, thoughts?
Hard not to be cynical. Gillette is a brand that's been losing market share for a long time. They've decided that they want to have a social conscience. They might have always had a social conscience, but now they're going to explain to us that they have a social conscience. And it just feels to me that it's lecturing and hectoring and patronising and condescending, to be perfectly honest with you. The issues that they're trying to address are much more serious and need to be dealt with comprehensively by everybody. I think they've probably contaminated the debate with this ad rather than done anything particularly helpful. And if they were serious about sexual harassment or domestic violence or those kinds of issues, then there'd be a lot of ways you could do it that were very authentic and sincere without it looking like you were trying to reignite your brand in the face of falling sales. So that's my sort of impression of it at this point.
Angela?
It's a rare moment that I agree with Mr. Baxter, but here it is. And what disturbed me the most was I felt insulted as a woman looking at it. My brother has beautiful little girls. He is not that man. There are no men in my life that are like that. And a lot of women use men's razors as well as an alternative product. And I can tell you that that market share is now going to be looked at in a different way. The other thing that offended me was it seemed to be white males that were the instigators of all the negatives in this campaign, and for some reason, why did it have to be like that? They compared themselves to the Nike brand and them coming out against injustices in the States. They are not the Nike brand. They are not a brand with that kind of conscience. They are now a brand, I think, that has humiliated themselves and insulted a big portion of the population.
Some people are saying this is basically Gillette saying, don't be a jerk, don't stand by while other people are jerks. And what's so wrong with that?
Yeah, I don't agree with the message.
Yeah, perhaps, but are they the ones that should be giving us that lesson?
Yeah, what gives them the kind of, why are they the authority on social...
Why weren't they,
socially acceptable norms?
Why not take a leadership position rather than a follower position?
Yeah.
Now that the broader frame around Me Too is safe territory in many respects for marketers, or safer.
Okay, you reckon? Because that was one interesting thing.
It's a lot safer than it was.
Feels like a test of all that to me.
If Gillette had put this ad out in the absence of Me Too 2 years ago, right?
Great point.
Would have been an extraordinarily strange thing for them to do, even though the issues were just as real and just as important then.
You could argue, though, that the more momentum and the more money that gets put behind a grassroots movement like Me Too, the better, and the more of a mainstream thing it becomes to talk about toxic masculinity and the way that you should interact with negative situations that you find yourself in. I mean, surely that can't be a negative message, regardless of who's sending it.
Chris, you're absolutely right.
But the way that they have done it and who is behind it and the portrayal of men in this ad, I find offensive.
Yeah.
You know, it can't be that way.
It was kind of that line, well, some are doing the right thing.
We can't go from one extreme to the other.
Well, as the token man here, you know, I wasn't
two men here, Mr. Baxter.
Well, of the two of us.
Yes.
I wasn't offended by the portrayal of men in the ad. I was offended by the fact that Gillette is sending us this message.
Yeah, they've kind of assumed social authority.
And all the things you said about the raising awareness and more money and attention and everything being spent on dealing with these issues, absolutely agree with you. But if it's their job, then don't try and sell us a razor on the way through. The other thing I read today, which was interesting, was that they also make razors for women, which are apparently more expensive.
Regardless of being the same.
Well, that's very sexist.
And I just think, if that's true,
Which
then
is why a lot of women use
over.
men's razors.
The parent company also got
stupid.
into trouble for the fact that the way they treat their employees offshore and where the whole manufacturing is being done, so that they can't hold themselves as a higher authority and a social accountability when they themselves, as a business owner, do not perform well for their employees themselves. So, you know, when they've got clean hands, they can comment.
I think one comment that I read that summed it up for me is just in the execution of that ad, you didn't come away feeling inspired, empowered, encouraged necessarily. It was kind of spent so long talking about the bad behaviour that we criticise men for, or some men for, that it just didn't quite nail it in terms of
it was finger wagging,
like a call to action or something. It was a lot of
wasn't
finger
even like the ads that deal with speeding or with smoking or with alcoholism in general. Those social ads that are out in the media deal with a theme or a content, and they deal directly with it. They don't pretend to sell you something. They expose something. They show it. But not. It seemed cheesy and not authentic. It didn't seem genuine.
Although I did see, like, the vast majority of people say today, well, if you are offended by this ad or think it's a bad thing, then you're obviously on the wrong side of this whole thing.
I don't agree there.
But I don't think I agree with that either. But that just seems the go-to line.
9 million views. 194,000 likes, 541 not
Chris
likes.
Noticed that.
Yeah, I did notice that. But it does seem that on YouTube particularly, we are very quick to defend ourselves, and we want to make sure that I'm not the one you're talking about. Our masculinity must not be sort of. We're very quick to defend ourselves.
Well, the problem is with the barbecue, because those barbecues are smoking very heavily.
Greg was offended.
There's a real problem around the masculinity.
Not enough.
Yes,
learn how to do a barbecue and then lecture us on other stuff, basically.
Yeah.
All right, we've seen another big story today in Australia. We were talking earlier about the size of the Australian Open, what a valuable event that is, but the chances of an Australian player actually winning at the Aussie Open this year is basically zero. Several current and former players are in the news anyway, and we know it's Bernard Tomic giving Lleyton Hewitt an absolute serve off the court. What did you guys think of this? I mean, we talked earlier about maybe the repercussions for Tennis Australia. Do you think they're calling in the crisis communications experts like yourself, Greg Baxter? I mean, how seriously do they reckon they're taking it?
Well, I think
you've dealt with this kind of situation in other.
It's a big story because the Open's on. It's January. There's not a lot of other news around.
And we're all invested in the tennis for 2 weeks.
We are invested in the tennis right now.
Not.
Happily, Tomic is out.
Yes.
Kyrgios is out. Right?
Yes.
So their relevance is declining markedly in the last 24 hours, right? And being lectured by Bernard Tomic about anything, you know, I would heavily discount that before you've even started assessing what the nature of the crisis looks like. If there is a case to answer in terms of the allegations he's made, Tennis Australia needs to jump onto that straight away and get to the bottom of it. I read a report today that said that none of the players that he's alleged to favour are represented by the management consultancy that he's involved with. So that would remove the conflict of interest allegation entirely.
Right.
But you could easily get to the bottom of that allegation and deal with that piece, and the rest of it, I think, just let Bernard disappear into the smoke.
Yeah, the tabloids are not.
So, well, no, but it's how damaging is it for tennis? Is it going to stop any kid picking up a tennis racket? Is it damaging to our international sporting reputation? I don't think so. I mean, I think most people who watch tennis in this country and elsewhere think that Tomic's a bit of a jerk, quite frankly.
He doesn't have any credibility. In any environment, including the jungle environment where he barely lasted 3 days.
That's true.
Someone only reminded me of that yesterday. I forgot he did reality TV briefly.
That's right. He couldn't hack that.
Yeah.
That was too hard. And
so that's your measure, is it?
Well, he's acted like, you know, a spoilt brat the entire time, having a talent that he has just not cared about so much when others search their entire lives for some kind of talent somewhere. And then he's ended up in an environment, and you could see when he walked away from the press conference, he turned around and he had that evil little look in his eye, like, I know what I've done, I know I'm hurting people here, and I don't care.
Yeah, I've dropped a grenade. And
and it's going to blow up and you take it. Yeah, well, actually it's not. It's going to backfire on you again.
Hewitt was when he was very young, was extremely petulant.
Yes.
Right? And quite a unattractive person in those early years, I thought. But he grew up. You know, there aren't a whole lot of signs. Well, not a lot of good signs at the moment that Tomic's got that in him, but let's hope he has.
The adolescent phase seems to be continuing with Mr. Tomic.
It feels like with each generation of Australian tennis players, it gets a little bit worse because you've got Rod Laver up the top. Okay, fair enough. But maybe the ones that are...
we love him.
All right, fair enough. Well, okay, that's been blown out of the water immediately, but I'm going to continue on with this. No, but you know what I mean? So it goes, you know, Rod Laver, Pat Rafter, Lleyton Hewitt, and then right down into the sort of the depths of Bernard Tomic and Nick Kyrgios smashing their rackets,
there's no
tongue
real
lashing.
Hunger. There's no real hunger to achieve, and you can attribute that to other mainstream sports too. When there's a lot of money involved, they don't have to work too hard. They get great sponsorship. They get free rides for everything. It's an easy life, and then if you don't have that hunger,
how does that explain Roger Federer and Pete Sampras?
It doesn't.
All of those people who are gentlemen of the sport.
Absolutely, and there are true gentlemen in many areas, and you know, Greg, obviously you're one of them. But he's a petulant child. He's less than a teenager. I mean, I've got a 4-year-old niece that behaves better all the time than the way Tomic does, and he's rubbished himself. I think we all feel safe in saying that it's not everyone else's reputational damage here. It is just him again. Unfortunately, it rates in the news.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I do think it would be so nice to see Alex de Minaur like front and centre for the way you know, carries himself. Yeah. I mean, he's doing fabulously well, unlike these guys who just keep crashing out. Right? You know, he's just won the City International.
So he'll get better sponsorship and he'll have a better financial career as well.
Yep.
He carries
cream rises to the top, and Tomic is not the cream.
Yeah,
unlike red wine, it will not get better with age.
Thank you so much to both of you, Angela and Greg. Great to see you back from holidays, Greg as well. Angela, thanks for sticking with us as well.